A criminal justice reform bill
has been agreed to.
The Senate vote came Tuesday night. In a rare show of bipartisanship, senators voted 87-12 to approve the First Step Act.
Are coming home to be with their loved ones, to find jobs, to find housing, and to hopefully succeed as contributing members of society.
Matthew Charles is believed to be the first person freed from prison because of the First Step Act. How does freedom feel?
Freedom feels wonderful. Encouragement is greatly welcomed. So I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful that God is in my life. I'm thankful that people are able to see that I have changed. And it is an example of a redemption story so that others that have changed will also be able to benefit from the change they made as well.
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Dion's Daily Dose. I'm Dion.
And I'm Sean.
And we're going to talk about the Senate hearing for the First Step Act.
Yep.
5 years later, what has it done? What has it accomplished? Overall, I think it's been a smashing success.
Yeah.
The video that we played at the beginning shows almost just shy of 30,000 people have been released under this bill. And their recidivism rate, which for you guys that aren't familiar with prison lingo, recidivism is when someone reoffends. They get out of prison and they go do more crimes and get rearrested. That's recidivism. The recidivism rate for the Bureau of Prisons, which is the federal prison system, is about 43%, it said. I have no reason to doubt that. The recidivism rate for those released under the First Step Act is significantly
it was 12%.
lower, like 12.7%. Way less. I find that an example of success. So Sean once again was kind enough to go through and watch the entirety of this hearing and pick out what he felt were the most important parts. So we're going to watch that together and comment on it. I played you guys that video because I think it's, regardless of party, right? And I know, maybe those Trump haters out there don't want to give the win to Trump.
Yeah.
But this was great legislation.
Yeah, it was.
It really was. So, but of course, he won't get the credit.
Even people on the left, some people on the left have agreed that this was a success.
As a positive thing.
Van Jones said that this was a success and they stole one of the issues from them.
That what?
That they took one of the issues that they cared about from them when they campaign on.
Oh, yeah. Trying to act like they had anything to do with this. Yeah. All right. So we're going to start pretty much right at the beginning. And we have one of our favorite idiots, Dick Durbin from Illinois. We got like minutes of this guy. Thanks, Sean. I'm just kidding.
He's the chair.
He is the chair, so we're gonna have to listen to his, But here we go. Let's just get into it and let the people decide. Always a big fan of that. Here we go.
This hearing, 5 years of the First Step Act, reimagining rehabilitation and protecting public safety, is long overdue. Today, the committee will hear from four witnesses about the success of the First Step Act. It is the most significant criminal justice reform legislation in a generation.
That's a hefty claim. The most significant criminal justice reform legislation in a generation.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot, man.
I want to thank Ranking Member Graham and his staff for working with us to select today's witnesses. It echoes the bipartisan spirit of cooperation that led to the enactment of this landmark legislation.
And I will say this legislation proves that it is possible for the sides to work together for the betterment of the American people. It's possible.
It's possible.
But what have we seen any example of that since Trump left office. Honestly, no.
No,
We
not
haven't.
really.
Not in my opinion.
I also want to thank everyone who has joined us today, including the U.S. Sentencing Commission Chair, Judge Carlton Reeves, and his colleagues who've been hard at work updating the federal sentencing guidelines to reflect the First Steps reform.
Okay.
Last month marked the 5th anniversary of Congress coming together and passing the First Step Act by an overwhelming bipartisan majority in both the House and the Senate.
Yeah.
At the outset, I'll turn to a video about the passage and the impact it's had.
Okay, this is the video that we saw at the beginning. I'll just play it.
Okay.
Let's just play it again because somebody might have just tuned in. Here we go.
A criminal justice reform bill
Has been agreed to.
The Senate vote came Tuesday night. In a rare show of bipartisanship, senators voted 87 to 12 to approve the First Step Act,
which is almost unheard of.
Yeah.
I agree with that. It's a
Are
success.
coming
It is.
home to be with their loved ones, to find jobs, to find housing, and to hopefully succeed as contributing members of society.
Matthew
that's what
Charles
we
is
want.
believed to be the first person freed from prison because of the First Step Act.
We want these
How does
people
freedom feel?
contributing members of
Freedom
society.
feels wonderful. Encouragement is greatly welcomed. So I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful that God is in my life. I'm thankful that people are able to see that I have changed, and it is a example of a redemption story, so that others that have changed will also be able to benefit from the change they made as well.
Look at this, 29,944, so just shy of 30,000 people. Their recidivism rate is only 12.4%. Bureau of Prisons recidivism rate, 43%. It's a smart on crime policy, giving people second chances.
I was proud to champion this landmark legislation, and I want to give special credit to Senator Grassley, who couldn't be here today. He's not feeling well,
Tragic.
but he was a real leader on this
I like
effort. It was
Oh,
signed into
Grassley,
law by
yeah.
President Trump. It was truly bipartisan from the start. It included support
Graham's
by,
okay.
with Senator Grassley, as I mentioned, Senator Booker, Senator
Graham wasn't
Lee,
there for some
Senator
reason.
Whitehouse, and Senator Cornyn. Those two individuals are with us here this
As
morning.
if they had actually.
It acknowledges the obvious. The vast majority of people who are incarcerated will one day be released.
Yeah,
So we should help prepare them for successful reentry.
I agree with
In the
that.
last 5 years, this landmark legislation has reduced the population in our overcrowded federal prisons safely and effectively, reuniting families and revitalizing communities. In addition to looking toward the future, the First Step Act helps to remedy the effects of the harsh and misguided drug sentencing laws from the 1980s. I remember
Which, I don't know if you know this, but Biden was directly
Yep.
responsible for said laws.
Uh-huh.
that era very well. I was a member of the House of Representatives. The arrival of crack cocaine scared the hell out of us. We decided to impose new sentencing guidelines, which would make it clear to the public once and for all that if you do crack cocaine, we're going to hit you and hit you hard. We sure as hell did. 100-to-1 disparity in sentencing between powder cocaine and crack cocaine. The net result of it all, sadly, was not what we'd hoped for. The price of crack cocaine on the street went down instead of up. The
Yep.
number of users went up instead of down, and we had the largest federal prison population in the history of the United States, predominantly African Americans who were convicted of those crimes. The sentences were astronomical. What used to be a matter of a handful of years turned into 10, 15, 20, 25, and beyond. That was the reality of the situation that we faced when we started talking about reforming the situation. The First Step Act helps to remedy the effects of those sentencing laws in the 1980s. I authored legislation, the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010, that reduced the disparity of 100-to-1 between crack and powder to 18. It's a long story as to how we came up with that magic number, but that was the number we had to live with. The First Step Act makes Fair Sentencing Act retroactive, allowing those still serving sentences under the disparity to petition for resentencing. I'm thankful.
Hey guys, just got an update. Apparently, a man tried to charge the stage as President Trump was speaking in Pennsylvania. Claim as violent leftist just tried to breach security at Trump's Pennsylvania rally, but was stopped by police. In a matter of seconds, the man was stopped, secured, and removed. You know, the way that it should be.
But it's getting scary.
It is getting scary. Sorry for pausing there. I just thought you guys, should know that.
Yeah.
I appreciate the heads up. Here we go.
For the tireless efforts of many dedicated advocates and families who never gave up hope that this bill could become law. Since the First Step Act's passage, I've met so many Americans who've successfully returned home because of.
I'm going to pause it here because I do want to give a little preface real quick. For those of you guys who are longtime viewers of the channel, you know me, you know my background, you know Sean. I was a correctional officer at a maximum security prison, Indiana State Prison here in Michigan City, Indiana. And I was also, as a teenager, I went to jail. I went to county jail because I did stupid shit, right? Mm-hmm. Teenagers, goofy, dumb stuff. And I was arrested and convicted. Criminal damage to coin-operated vending machines. Is that the stupidest charge you've ever heard? Here's the thing, right? I was sentenced to a year, 2 for 1, so I did 6 months, and I got out and I changed my life because I didn't want that anymore. For me, it was a wake-up call. It was like, oh yeah, if I keep doing this stupid shit, I'm going to end up being that kind of life, and I don't want that kind of life. I ended up turning myself around. Many, many years later, I was able to pass a full FBI background check in order to become a correctional officer at a maximum security prison. A lot of the guys in there, the vast majority of the people in there are going to get out someday. Most of the people in the maximum security prison are not there for life. They're serving 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, but they're going to get out and they're going to come to your neighborhood. I like this, not because we're just cutting people loose, because that's not what it's about. It's about preparing them for the transition to regular society. Yeah. And once you serve a certain amount of time in jail / prison, really, once you serve a certain amount of time, the world is different when you get out. Like, think about it. Smartphones and all this stuff has not been around as long as people think it has. Email, internet, all these things are fairly recent comparatively. So you have people that are coming out to a completely technological world who, like, the most tech they might have had was a Commodore 64 when they went in. That's a huge difference, man. Some people, predate computers at all. Yeah. So just think about that for a moment. I am personally all for giving people the skills that they need to no longer be a criminal, to be a functioning and contributing member of society. So I have seen both sides of the bars. I know how it works. So I personally, my opinion, phenomenal legislation.
This historic legislation. Some would still be in prison today if Congress had not passed the First Step Act and President Trump had not signed it. Today, we'll hear from one of them. One of our witnesses, Matthew Charles. I told him he was the star of the show after that video. I'm glad you're here, Mr. Charles. The First Step Act has been quite a success. Of almost 30,000 people released under its reforms
That's
through January
awesome.
2023, only 12.4% have been arrested for new crimes.
That's shockingly low compared to the recidivism rates of state and federal prisons. Like we said, like about 42 to 43% is the average. So 12% is nothing.
Compare that to Bureau of Prisons' overall recidivism rate, more than 3 times that number, 43%. Even with this legislation's achievement in reducing recidivism, we must remember that it is indeed a first step in a long journey toward thinking about rethinking rehabilitation and reversing failed approaches in our criminal justice system. In order to make our system fairer, we must continue to learn proven successes, smart on crime policies like the First Step Act. We must provide more opportunities for those who were incarcerated to re-enter society successfully, reunite with their families, and contribute to their communities. Now, make no mistake, as much as I believe in what we've done and would do it all over again, there have been some of these situations where people have been released and broken my heart. I thought we got them on the right path, but it didn't happen.
It's going to happen.
We can't give up on so many who are going to be successful in reuniting with families and rehabilitating their lives because of those few. But I think
That's like saying we should stop all parole because Johnny got out and did stupid stuff.
Uh-huh.
There have to be like the majority of people, even with the Bureau of Prisons recidivism rate, that still means the majority do not reoffend.
Them as well. 5 years ago, we wrote the blueprint for reimagining rehabilitation and protecting public safety, and we know by the numbers that it works. Today, I'm looking forward to reflecting on what we can achieve moving forward. Senator Graham has not arrived yet. I'm going to recognize Senator Cornyn. Will you give the opening statement? And thank you for your participation and help on this issue for this.
Okay, so we're going to move on to Senator Cornyn, right? Cornyn.
Yeah, Cornyn.
Republican from the great state of Texas. Dude, I love me some Texas, man. The only downside is you ever like traveled across Texas?
Uh-uh.
Oh my God, dude.
But it's a huge state.
Across Texas is insanely huge. You don't realize, like, it takes a full day to travel from one end of Texas to the other. It's massive. If you are like using trucker rules, you can't go in a single shift. There's no way you can make it across Texas in 10 hours. It's not possible. It's just not. So you need multiple shifts. So it ends up taking 2 days or more to get across Texas. Wow. Think about that. That's
a massive state.
Nuts, dude. It's huge.
You bet.
Anyway.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you for giving us the opportunity to discuss crime in America and the important role played by our justice system. As we know, as you noted, the First Step Act sailed through Congress 5 years ago with overwhelming support on both sides of the aisle. It passed a Republican-led Senate, 87-12. It passed a Republican-led House, 358 to 36. Those were the days. President Trump signed it into law.
He's not wrong.
When we debated the First Step Act, we talked about the revolving door of the criminal justice system. We aim to reduce recidivism rates and prevent formerly incarcerated people from landing behind bars again, if possible. Portions of the law were aimed at slowing the revolving door, particularly those that focus on prison programming and evidence-based recidivism reduction training that have been successfully pioneered in many states, including my home state of Texas.
Okay. Those guys brought us up to speed on what the First Step Act is, how successful it's been, and now we're going to hear from
the witnesses
themselves.
Yep.
Well, first we have to do the intro and the swearing in.
The swearing in first.
That is 2435. By the way, the name of this video: Senate Judiciary Hearing on 5 years of the First Step Act.
And then the Union
presented
Herald.
by the Union Herald. Yeah. Okay. So 2435. Okay. And this is 2435 to 2435 to 3524. The intro and more importantly, the swearing in of the witnesses. We get to hear who these people are and why they're here.
I want to welcome our consensus witness panel. First witness will be Matthew Charles, a senior policy advisor with the Criminal Justice Reform Organization, FAM.
Yeah, that's the guy that got out of prison. He was featured in that video. He is now a member of the panel that's deciding how all this proceeds, which is kind of awesome.
Yeah.
One of the first people released from federal prison under the First Step Act. We also are joined by J. Charles Smith, State's Attorney for Frederick County, Maryland, and President of the National District Attorneys Association. We also welcome Jerron Smith, who served as a Deputy Assistant to former President Trump on the White House Domestic Policy Council. And last but not least, we'll hear from Steve Markle, Special Education Teacher with the Bureau of Prisons and the National Secretary Treasurer for the Council of Prison Locals. Let me lay out the mechanics. After swearing in the witnesses, they'll each have 5 minutes to make an opening statement. Members will then have 5 minutes each to ask questions of those members of the panel. So let me administer the oath and ask the panel to please rise.
Real quick, guys, stick around after the end of the video and I'll fill you in on what's going on. I had a power outage here and stuff, kind of set us back, but I'll fill you in after.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record.
Oh, look, Duron Smith, he's black. I thought Trump hated black people.
That's what they claim, but he doesn't.
Reflect that the witnesses thankfully have answered in the affirmative. And we're going to start with Mr. Charles in your opening statement. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Graham, Chairman Durbin, I'm sorry, Ranking Member Graham, and members of the committee. Good morning. My name is Matthew Charles, and I'm happy to be here. Since I was released under the First Step Act 5 years ago, I've spoken on several occasions about my journey in that legislation. I've even spoken to some of you before in this very chamber. I am happy to be here today to mark the 5-year anniversary of this landmark legislation. I've been called a man of few words, but many smiles. But today I've got both. I'm honored and pleased to be with you now to celebrate and reflect on the First Step Act and the difference it's made in my life and thousands of others. But before I talk to you about who I am today, you need to hear about who I used to be, because my story is a story of redemption. That's an empty word unless change has happened. And I can assure you, change has definitely happened. I grew up in a dangerous public housing block in North Carolina. My days and nights were filled with fear. I was consumed with trying to get as far away as possible from my father's relentless abuse and frequent beatings. From the age I could talk and walk, these things had occurred in my life. Due to that environment and my father's influence, I soon found myself with these huge wells of anger and frustration, and not much else. I began to act out as a way of coping. I got as mean and as tough as my father was, and I made a lot of very bad choices. Incidentally, I share all this not as an excuse, but to help you understand why I made the bad choices that resulted in my incarceration. When I turned 18, in an effort to break free from my home life and straighten out, I joined the Army. I still had so much anger in me because of my past, though, and when my service was over, I turned to wayward living and selling drugs. This landed me in state prison for about 5 years. Then things got even worse. I was arrested in 1995 and convicted in 1996 for selling 216 grams of crack cocaine to an informant and illegally possessing a gun. Because of my prior criminal activity and because I sold crack cocaine instead of powder cocaine, I was given a 35-year sentence. I want to be clear. I believe that my incarceration was justified.
Yeah.
I was far down the wrong path, and my incarceration allowed me to slow down, look inwardly, and begin to heal and rehabilitate. However,
it certainly gives you a lot of time to think.
I believe my 35-year prison sentence was excessive.
I agree.
If crack and powder cocaine were treated the same when I was sentenced, my sentence would have been 20 years and not 35 years. But the 100-to-1 disparity was in place at that time. I told you my story was about redemption. Well, here's where that begins, the good part. It was before sentencing in the county jail, and I met a guy named Jesus Duran. We got to talking, and when he was sentenced and transferring out, he left me all of his things. I think he felt sorry for me, but among those things was a Bible. I had never read the Bible before in my life.
Jesus gave him a
Had no interest in reading it, but for some reason, sitting there in that jail cell, I cracked it open, and as I read those words, turning the pages slowly, I felt something deep inside of me change. All that anger and pain and bitterness that had controlled me up until that point, I gave it up, just let go. I surrendered my heart and life over to the Lord Jesus Christ. From that moment on, my attitude toward people changed. Right down to the officers that brought me my food trays at the jail. I thought about the hard journey ahead of me. 35 years, not with agony and fear, but now with determination to be better and not waste my life any further. I went to federal prison and continued to live out the new life that I had accepted according to my faith. I worked as a GED tutor a law library clerk, and as a mentor to younger people. I help illiterate prisoners understand the letters they receive from the courts and their own families, and I drafted filings for them. Over the next 21 years, I didn't receive a single disciplinary infraction. And every day when I woke up, I lived my life like someone who deserved a second chance.
I'm going to tell you, as again, I was an officer at Indiana State Prison. It is extremely difficult to go that long without any infractions. Like, the system's designed to punish any aberration. It's designed for you to follow the rules. However, the rules sometimes are wrong. They're just wrong. And it is damn near impossible to make it that long without running afoul of someone or something. So good for him. That's a hell of an achievement.
Not like someone whose life will be defined by my worst actions.
Okay.
All my years in prisons, all of us inside together watched criminal justice reforms on the horizon. We cheered when they happened and were crushed when they went nowhere.
Yep.
Senators, we also watched you, and we prayed that you would help us. When it seemed like the First Step Act might actually pass, we were all glued to the television. We watched President Donald Trump as he was about to sign it, holding our breath. And when he finally did, we cheered and shouted hallelujah.
Yep.
And I was released. Thanks to many of you, especially Senator Grassley and Chairman Durbin, I was spared from spending another decade behind bars. I left prison for good on January 3rd, 2019, just 2 weeks after President Trump signed the bill into law. I became the first person to benefit from the retroactive provision in the First Step Act. I had a lot of amazing life moments since my release. I was the guest of President Trump at the 2019 State of the Union. I met senators from across the country, including many of this committee. But the most rewarding experience and the most important work I have done has been advocating for those that I left behind. There are a lot of people still behind bars who, like I was, are committed to making changes and finding a new path, who do not need to spend decades in prison to learn about their lessons or to learn their lesson.
Yeah.
I've been working hard for a system that is fair and just and doesn't harm families and communities by keeping people incarcerated unnecessarily.
I agree with that.
Today, as we reflect about the First Step Act, I am reminded of the powerful, broad, bipartisan support this bill enjoyed when it was signed into law by President Trump. I am here today to encourage Congress to continue on that path of bipartisan criminal justice reform. Some people may fear that criminal justice reform will make our communities less safe, but I'm here to tell you that your work on the First Step Act has proven that this line of thinking is incorrect. I've told you my story, but if I am not special, and I'm not unique, in my advocacy work, I've met many, many beneficiaries of the First Step Act who are out here in freedom, making their families stronger and their communities safer. They are living proof that reform does work. And 5 years of data bears this out as well. Because of the First Step Act, some of our country's most excessive and unfair sentencing practices, misguided sentencing laws meant to keep us safer, which in reality has had the opposite effect, have been reformed. This means that dangerous overcrowding in prisons is decreasing. Rehabilitation rates are on the rise, and thousands of families like mine have been reunited and are stronger. As to the fear, people released will go right back into a life of crime. Of the nearly 30,000 people released under the First Step Act, only 12.4% have been arrested or returned to federal custody, much lower than a general federal recidivism rate of 43%, which we also watched in the video earlier. Between 2022 and 2023, participation in rehabilitative programming and productive activities in prison has jumped by more than a third because of the First Step Act. The vast majority of people in federal prison will be released one day. Over 90% of them will. Thanks to the First Step Act, they will be better prepared to return to their families and communities and be productive law-abiding members of society.
Oh.
Remember,
That's right.
I told you that mine was a story of redemption. I told you about that moment in my jail cell before I even got to prison, when I felt redeemed, the day that I accepted the Lord Jesus Christ. And I told you that my life in prison was one of positive productivity. But the main reason I'm here today is to tell you that my redemption meant nothing compared to what it means now. Now that the First Step Act has placed me out here in freedom, it's out here that I can really walk the walk and make my family stronger, my community safer, and my country more just and fair. Thank you for the First Step Act, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
So I'll say this. This guy sounds like he knows what's up.
Yeah.
I mean, he definitely knows what's up. Yeah, people are going to reoffend. A percentage of the population, there's nothing you can do about that. But if you prepare people, I'm going to tell you, like at ISP, when I worked there, the resources available for teaching people how to reintegrate into society was very limited, very, very limited. So I would like to see the First Step Act teach people how to survive, not as a criminal.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the point. Okay, our next clip is immediately following, and it's Charlie Smith.
Mr. Charles. Mr. J. Charles Smith is next.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin and members of this committee. My name is Charlie Smith. I'm the state's attorney for Frederick County, Maryland, just up 270. I'm also president of the National District Attorneys Association, which is the oldest and the largest national nonpartisan nonprofit organization. We represent over 3,000 elected state's attorneys and district attorneys across the country, as well as over 40,000 assistant prosecutors. Part of our mission is to serve as the voice of America's prosecutor. We recognize the vital role that prosecutors play in the safety of local communities, including evaluating and making ongoing improvements to our criminal justice system that promote fairness, accountability, efficiency, and justice. And so I do appreciate this opportunity to talk about NDA's effort towards realizing goals of the First Step Act. By way of background, we are and should be, as prosecutors, at the very forefront of continuously improving our criminal justice system.
Agreed.
We must support public safety and enforcement of the law while promoting accountability, rehabilitation, and alternatives to incarceration.
Yeah.
So we are tasked with the constitutional duty of protecting our communities. We serve justice each and every day in our courtrooms, balancing the needs of the victims of crime against protecting the innocent. And once again, we're acutely aware of the need to improve and reform our criminal justice system as we're doing it each and every day. So the First Step Act was supported by NDAA. It was a bipartisan effort to address front-end sentencing change and back-end prison reform. And we felt it struck an appropriate balance between addressing the needs of the current prison population while ensuring criminals are penalized appropriately.
Yeah.
The FSA provided meaningful change where truly dangerous criminals are locked up for an appropriate period of time.
Yeah.
And those with addiction or mental health issues have a chance for treatment and rehabilitation. In terms of the First Step Act implementation, one of the great things about the Act is its proven effectiveness for low-risk, nonviolent offenders while ensuring the public is protected from high-risk, violent offenders. So only 1 year after the First Step Act was signed into law, the Bureau of Prisons received a risk and needs assessment through the use of a tool known as Pattern. And again, this tool was intended to calculate the risk of recidivism of inmates as required by the FSA. It also made adjustments to good time credit, allowed eligible inmates to earn good time credits for participating and completing assigned evidence-based recidivism reduction programs.
That stuff actually works.
So the BOP policies were updated to
Good to know.
expand the use of home confinement for
yeah.
low-risk individuals and pilot programs for the elderly and terminally ill inmates. And so
The key to remember is that just like police officers, right? every individual is an individual.
Mm-hmm.
What works for this group may not work for that group. But in general, you can present rehabilitation options and teach people rather than they're already in prison. They're not going anywhere. I mean,
The department's drug treatment strategy has enrolled thousands of inmates in RDAP, which is the Residential Drug Abuse Program. And lastly, they also use medication-assisted treatment program available to qualified inmates. What we'd like to emphasize is that the First Step Act is not just a feel-good act that sounds good in theory.
right.
It really is not. The data suggests that recidivism rates have dropped substantially. And we've heard those rates from the chairman, from Mr. Charles to my right, that are substantially lower than the other rates. I mean, you're talking 12.4% versus 46.2%.
It's huge.
I mean, those are compelling statistics
They are.
and go to show that FSA was, again, not just some kind of feel-good act, but something that really had proven results.
Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree. This is something that absolutely works. We have evidence now. We have data. I remember the New York Times and a couple other lefty rags wanted to talk about how unsafe our communities were going to be because of the First Step Act, right?
Uh-huh.
Sure sounds like it's working.
Yeah.
I mean, just saying. Okay, so our next clip is oh, I'm sorry.
In terms of
Yeah, we're done. Our next clip is 4306 to 4705. Steve Markle.
Mr. Markle?
Good morning, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Graham, and members of the committee. I'm honored to represent the Council of Prison Locals and provide a statement on the implementation of the First Step Act within the Federal Bureau of Prisons. The Council of Prison Locals represents nearly 30,000 Bureau of Prisons employees who work tirelessly inside Americans' prisons. These dedicated correctional professionals ensure the safety of inmates, staff, and the public, even in the face of adversity posed by some of the world's most dangerous individuals. Having worked for the Federal Bureau of Prisons for over 20 years as a special education teacher, I have firsthand experience witnessing the positive impact of the First Step Act. I can attest to the added desire for inmates to attend GED courses, which will allow them upon completion to enroll in vocational courses. We have seen the increase of inmates enrolling in apprenticeship courses and participation in adult continuing education classes. The dyslexia screening requirement of the First Step Act has assisted in identifying inmates with learning disabilities. Identifying disabilities has enhanced our staff's ability to assist these inmates.
I agree.
While the BOP has known and provided educational courses for years, this act has highlighted the need to enhance what has been previously provided. An enormous amount of classes have been added since the implementation of the First Step Act. Over the years, we have collaborated with Chair Durbin's office and Senator Grassley's office in regards to the First Step Act and its effect on the Bureau. Our council also continued to work with BOP representatives to develop policies for the successful implementation and management of the First Step Act. The council remains committed to the First Step Act and the goal to reduce repeat offenses and to prepare inmates for release. Active participation in programs is crucial for successful preparation. Inmates now show more interest in programs that they may have previously ignored. They currently receive credit for being on waiting lists, trying to enroll into full programs. To ensure inmates receive the necessary skills and education, it's important to increase staffing and also to increase programming spaces. The council supports the FSA's motive and the ability to motivate inmates to stay engaged in programming, reducing idleness. I'm eager to discuss the First Step Act's effects on the dedicated staff members who carry out the Bureau's mission each day. Previous directors of the Bureau of Prisons have lauded the positive impact of the First Step Act before this very committee, and we acknowledge its importance as well. However, we believe that certain factors, if left unaddressed, will limit the Act's full potential.
Okay.
Our primary concern is the current staffing levels within the Bureau of Prisons. Since the signing of the First Step Act, the filled positions in the Bureau of Prisons have decreased from over 43,000 to the current amount of 34,000.
Yeah, 9,000.
They're 9,000 people short,
Uh-huh.
is what he's saying. And I don't know if you guys are like, I'm going to assume you're unfamiliar with prisons. You need people, you need staff because you're already greatly outnumbered.
Uh-huh.
The way that personnel is set up, they have X number of officers per location. And if they are unable to fill the positions, then they already stretched resources even thinner, which is dangerous. It's just dangerous. And I want to address something really quickly before we move on. A lot of people, especially civilians who aren't, I say civilians, but people who aren't familiar with the prison system or haven't worked at a prison, it's very easy to say, oh, we shouldn't be paying for anything for these guys, right? They shouldn't have classes. They shouldn't have college. They shouldn't have any of this stuff. And I understand the sentiment. I do, because these are criminals. Why should we be paying anything? Well, I'm going to tell you, number one, we already pay to feed and house them. That's a fixed cost. There's nothing we can do about that. That's just there. But what's the cost if they get out and they go on to commit more crimes and they return? It's a lot more expensive than if we had given them a skill to utilize, like carpentry or metalworking or something like that. They learn that, and then they can go out and get a real job instead of return to dealing drugs or whatever they ended up in there for.
This reduction of 8,708 staff members raises concerns about our ability to effectively carry out our responsibilities.
Yeah.
The impact of these staffing cuts, particularly evident among our correctional officers who serve as our first line of security. At the end of 2023, we have approximately 12,300 correctional officers, which are 8,000 below the appropriated number from Congress.
So it's even worse than what he said.
Uh-huh.
That is huge disparity. That is a massive disparity.
When requested for staffing numbers, the Bureau often provides ratios and percentage to members of Congress. We have only 60.1% of our appropriated correctional officers right now. The insufficiency leads to the overuse of a procedure known as augmentation and reassignment. This is where non-correctional officers are assigned to perform the duties of correctional officers. This not only compromises the safety by reducing the number of staff available to respond to emergencies, but also hinders the provision of programming in the First Step Act. To fully realize the Act's potential, it's crucial to address the critical staffing crisis within the Bureau of Prisons. The Council believes that staffing crisis can only be resolved by addressing a pay band issue. The current pay structure within the Bureau is significantly lower than other federal law enforcement agencies.
I mean, he's not wrong. Why do you go to work at a prison, right? You don't do it because if you want to make a difference, being a correctional officer is not the way to do it. If you want to teach people like how to not reoffend and how to turn their lives around, the correctional officer isn't the one who does that. People do it because they want to get paid. It's not a bad job. It's very secure as far as job security goes. I mean, people are always going to be in prison. You got to pay them. You got to pay them because you can either go work for Bureau of Prisons for X amount per year, or you can go work like at Indiana State Prison for X amount per year. Indiana State Prison's right up the road from me. Okay, our next clip is 4753 to 5130, and is J-Ron Smith.
He was a member of the Trump administration.
Yeah, he was. What was he?
I don't remember what he did.
They said it at the beginning, but I forgot.
He just was a member. I
think he was. I think he was involved in the First Step Act creation.
Yeah. Mr. Markle, Mr. Smith.
There we go.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Graham, and members of the Judiciary Committee. I am honored here today to commemorate the 5-year anniversary of the First Step Act. Growing up, I've witnessed firsthand the damage that a broken criminal justice system can wreak on families and communities.
I agree with that.
So when I got the chance to work on a landmark criminal justice reform bill during my time in the Trump administration, I jumped on it. I work with many people in this room on both sides of the aisle. Right of center groups such as Right on Crime, Americans for Prosperity, the American Conservative Union, SEDIC Association, Prison Fellowship, the Decent Center, and many others supported the bill and continue to lead on criminal justice reform today. We worked hand in hand with Democratic leaders in the House and the Senate, and with left of center groups such as the ACLU, Cut 50, or DREAM, and Families Against Mandatory Minimums. Together, we passed a bill that has had tremendous success. However, some critics of the law have cherry-picked rare cases of recidivism to claim the First Step Act contributed to the rise in crime during the pandemic. That is simply not true.
No, it's not.
According to federal data, the recidivism rate for federal prisoners is about 43%. For those released under the First Step Act, the rate is just 12%, and technical violations, not new crimes, account for a third of that number.
Wow.
We're now at a crossroads with a critical choice to make. We can either pursue policies that have proven to fail, or we can follow in the footsteps of the First Step Act and continue to adopt policies that are smart on crime. That is exactly what I've continued to work on since leaving the White House. I've partnered with right of center and law enforcement groups to continue pushing for reforms like the First Step Act that are smart on crime. We created a coalition called Public Safety Solutions for America that is guided by 4 common sense principles for reducing crime. First, support our police by properly funding them. We need to ensure that there are enough police on the streets and that departments have the amount of money they need to attract, train, and retain the best talent. Second, focus law enforcement's time and resources on preventing and solving the most serious crimes. Police are too often asked to play the role of social worker. Specialized community groups must take on a larger role in managing mental illness, drug use, homelessness, so police can focus more on preventing and solving violent crime.
I agree with that.
Third, implement evidence-based policies that have been proven to reduce violent crime. For example, Dallas Police Chief Eddie Garcia has used proven tactics such as focused deterrence, hotspot policing, and urban blight reduction. As a result, overall violent crime has decreased in the city for the 3rd year in a row.
Wow.
Fourth, continue exploring, sharing, and enacting smart on crime solutions that hold people accountable, increase public safety, and respect the dignity of all human beings. These types of smart on crime solutions resonate with conservatives. Pollings from the Adams Project indicates that 86% of Republican primary voters agree with the policies in the First Step Act.
I mean, it really says it there. I mean, and I wholeheartedly agree that we need to be smart on crime, not just tough, because we saw what tough on crime got us, overflowing prisons. And don't get me wrong, I am all for being, quote, tough on crime, but you have to do it intelligently. And I think this is the way to go about it. All right, so our next clip is from 5348 to 5748, and we got Durbin again. No.
The committee, that's fine too. But let me start with Mr. Charles. There was a moment when your life turned around. Was that all your decision, your experience? Was there something external that made a difference to you that you think could help someone else in the future?
I think what actually took place in my life was I was at a period to where I was in the county jail. My past, like I said, had been one of shame. And at that moment, I think the fact that I was arrested in that county jail and open to change, that it actually happened. But I don't want to get caught up on the fact that my story is unique in any capacity, because people actually change or become rehabilitated for various reasons. A lot of times it may be because of they've now been separated from their family and their loved ones for a prolonged period of time. It may be due to the fact that they've aged since they've been incarcerated. And it may just be to the fact that they've waken up and realized, because of what I've done, I don't have an opportunity to go anywhere. And that's kind of like what took place in my life. The change happened, but I wasn't released till 22 years later.
Well, I will tell you that nobody is asking for the Durbin Plan for shaping up Congress, but I'm going to give part of it to you anyway. I think that every member of Congress in every 2-year term or every 6-year term should visit a foreign country. I think it's important. Come to understand that country even better and come to understand your home even more. And secondly, visit a prison.
Yes.
I've done that regularly throughout my congressional career. It's important that members of Congress see this firsthand and meet the people in these prisons, those who are serving time and those who are watching, and give you a better understanding of our system of justice.
Yeah.
And you'll realize, as Mr. Markle indicated, that there is some danger associated with it for sure. There are people there who are dangerous people and will always be dangerous.
Yes.
And we have to.
I agree. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. There is a percentage of incarcerated who should never get out. They are dangerous. There's no great epiphany they're going to have. They're not going to read the Bible and suddenly love Jesus. And they're dangerous. They're predators and they should be locked up, but they do not represent the majority.
The majority, would you say, just made a mistake?
Yes. Yeah. The vast majority of people in our prisons just made a series of bad decisions, sometimes just one bad decision. And I mean, overwhelming majority of people are just people who messed up.
And those people deserve to have another chance.
Sure. It doesn't mean we should throw open the gates and let them all out because, crime should be punished.
Yeah.
But I am all in favor of looking for ways to teach people the right way to live. Many of these people never had a positive father figure. Their like life was a steaming pile of and they don't know how to live. They don't know the average American story. They have no idea. And we need to do better at teaching people that.
Acknowledge that reality. But there are also people like you, Mr. Charles, who has that one moment of Paul on the road to Taurus, if I got that correct, and struck from his horse and changed his life. And you had that moment. Mr. Smith from the District Attorneys Association, what is your thought about what else we could be doing or should be doing from the First Step Act?
Well, the First Step Act did a great job of differentiating between good people making bad decisions and bad people making bad decisions.
Yeah.
Okay, the bad people who make bad decisions, they stay in jail.
That's a really good breakdown.
yeah.
That's a great statement right there.
Because they should. They're a threat to public safety. The good people that made a bad decision, that were convicted for it, went to jail for it,
And they should.
are getting rehabilitated and released earlier as well. They should. I think there's a narrative out there about mass incarceration. Well, without mass criminality, there would be no incarceration. So I think what we need to do is focus on why people are committing crime in the first place. We have a problem with crime in the United States of America, juvenile crime especially. On a recent call to the White House, I was told that car thefts among juveniles are almost 1 million car thefts across the United States.
It's a terrible problem, terrible challenge.
It's a terrible problem. So we're doing a great job of implementing reforms like the First Step Act. I think what we're not really doing a great job of is figuring out why people are committing crime in the first place. I don't know whether it's a lack of opportunity, whether it's a lack of family, education, I'm not sure. But we need to definitely focus on why people are taking a first step towards committing crime and do something about that.
Thank you. Senator.
I mean, the cause of crime, right, is a deep subject because it varies. But ultimately, what he said rings true. Good people who made a mistake shouldn't spend their entire life behind bars. I mean, when they kill someone, that's
that's different.
It's different. But genuinely dangerous people, for the most part, other than some liberal paradises, are incarcerated and they stay incarcerated. And that's not what this program is for. This program is not to help them get out early. So, and they should be, exactly.
Yeah, they should be.
All right. So our next clip is Senator Hirono.
Corona.
Corona from Hawaii,
Yep.
Hawaii. 103.33 to 109.05. Oh, her.
Okay, you remember her now.
For him, this is a very important issue. I do want to ask each of you, with the diverse backgrounds that you have, as you talked about the successes under the First Step Back, for each of you, and we can start with Mr. Charles, what is the what is the most effective next step that we can take to follow up on the First Step Back that we should consider pursuing in a bipartisan way? I know that the chairman asked some of you this, but I just wanted to get a sense from the entire panel. What do you think is the most important next step that we should contemplate?
Thank you, Senator. I would say in regards to that question, there are two things that immediately come to mind. I believe that there should be second look laws passed by this Congress for those federal prisoners. And the reason being is because whenever I gave my testimony earlier, I spoke about me serving 22 years in prison. And I also spoke about my saving date, that I accepted my Savior in 1995. And I was sentenced in 1996 to 35 years. So for over 20-something years, I was in federal prison with not one disciplinary infraction. I was doing everything that you would want somebody incarcerated to do to show signs of rehabilitation. But nobody knew that except me, my family, and those that were formerly incarcerated around me, because the judge never knew that. He sentenced me and I was gone. And the society never knew that. They just knew how I used to be when I was out in the street. So second look laws will allow that person to petition the court, and then the court will be able to look at that person's record of incarceration and see have there been any, substantial changes. Also to see what type of vocational
I'm not sure how that would
educational
work.
courses or classes that they have achieved taken. And then he would be able to make a conscious decision, of course, with the district attorney also looking at that petition and filing whatever statement that he wants to forward or opposing it, and then be able to say, okay, this person has made a significant change in his life and no longer remains a threat or a public safety factor, and therefore could be safely released back into society. So I would say to create some second look laws is one, and the other is one that I'm hoping this Congress will pass this year, is pass the Equal Act. And the reason being is because I was sentenced under 101. I stated earlier in my opening statement how I was given a 35-year sentence as opposed to a 20-year sentence because of that disparity between those two drugs. We understand today, we understood as early as 2000, 2010, when it was lowered to 18-1. Chairman Durbin stated how the 18-1 ratio he didn't say came out of thin air, but it came up with something that was acceptable before this Congress. But there needs to be no disparity between those two drugs. And,
Thank you. I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but I know that we need to do more sentencing reform. I'm sorry that you spent so many years in prison, but I thank you for participating. Mr. Smith.
God, she's so dismissive, dude. Like, she just exudes.
I'm not sure how that would work either, because
Basically, we already have
that sounds
early
like
releases.
that sounds like parole.
However, I will say this: federal prison is different than state prisons. Like state prisons, you have like 2 for 1 and all that stuff, right? Federal prison, I'm pretty sure, is day for day, and the earliest you can get out, I think, is like 75 or 80% of your sentence you have to serve before you're eligible for parole. State prison's a little different. I'm not opposed to exploring the possibility of adjustment. However, I think this is a good start, and I don't want to take too big a steps forward on fixing it. Moving on.
What is the next important thing that we should pursue? And I have less than 2 minutes, so if you could just make it very brief.
I think we need to be smarter about how inmates earn diminution credits and get out. So as we say, we don't just want a second look. We want the prison population to understand this is what they need to do in order to get out earlier, as opposed to just coming before a parole board saying, hey, I've been here and haven't done anything wrong.
Right.
Let's focus on I've been here and I've done a lot of things right. And therefore I'm reformed, I'm rehabilitated, and I am less likely to reoffend when I get out of prison.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Mr. Markle?
I would say implementation. We have been doing the best we can with what we have. We need more resources. We need better policies. Our agency we work for sometimes isn't the most transparent to Congress, but what we need to do is provide you all with the information you need to pass the laws, and then we need to have the resources we need on the ground to actually implement those.
Mr. Smith?
Yes, I would agree with Mr. Markle that certainly more funding to implement the First Step Back and being able to stand it up is going to help with further reducing recidivism. But I also think focusing on community supervision. I know that Mr. Cornyn mentioned legislation that he sponsored to reform our supervision. That also will help with recidivism. As you can imagine, with the First Step Back, a number of the individuals that recidivated was from technical violations, which we would need to reform, and the Community Supervision Act, Safer Supervision Act actually does that work. And so I think that would be an excellent second step.
Thank you, thank you very much. Just one more point. We do have halfway houses for people who are coming out of prison. Do all of you acknowledge that that is an important step in having a person come back into the community to have?
No, I'm gonna break in right here because if you have any kind of understanding of how a halfway house actually works, in many cases, it is many, many times worse than simply them going home to their family. Like the almost invariably, they're going to share space with people who are not reformed and they're actively out committing crimes. And a lot of times it just creates a network of criminals. And my mom worked at a halfway house, a federal one, and the stories she told me were just insane, absolutely insane.
These kinds of places for them to go to within their own communities. Does anybody disagree with the importance of these halfway houses? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Lucky I'm not there.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, right? If done correctly, a halfway house is a positive thing. The problem is anytime you introduce humans into an equation, right? It's like the whole, like the communism looked great on paper, but unfortunately you have to have humans involved, that kind of thing. Anytime you introduce humans into an equation and put them in charge of things, issues happen. Okay, so our next clip is Senator Lee from Utah. And
Mr. Marking it was
what? Stop it. And we are at 1:11:01.
Effort on this committee on both sides of the aisle. It's absolutely essential as we celebrate this milestone, Mr. Chairman, that we differentiate between this legislation and the overwhelmingly positive effects that it's had.
Yeah.
That we differentiate this measure and what we celebrate from it from something that's totally different from it, with which it's often confused and can sometimes be mistaken.
Yeah.
The violent crime wave sweeping across our country has absolutely nothing to do with the First Step Act. That is a wave that's caused by a completely independent force, something having to do with prosecutors across the country who are just deciding not to prosecute entire swaths of crime, including some significant categories of violent crime. Some of them.
I mean, we saw it. Look, they illegal aliens beat police officers, and then were just set free. Just set free.
Most egregious offenses. And it's alarming to see the complete disregard that some prosecutors show for public safety in their diluted effort to advance some other kind of interest other than the rule of law by just promising not to prosecute entire categories of crime. Now, some have criticized the First Step Act for today's crimes, but that's wildly inaccurate. The First Step Act, of course, does absolutely nothing to change the sentences applicable for violent crimes. As Mr. Smith said, Mr. Jerron Smith, the First Step Act, quote, is about developing and implementing a system in which nonviolent prisoners are given the incentive to improve their behavior and ultimately improve themselves, gaining the education and tools they'll need to succeed when they eventually do leave prison. I couldn't agree more. And blaming the First Step Act for problems that are caused by deliberate prosecutorial inaction is about the same as getting your cavity filled by your dentist one day, and the next day when your basement floods, blaming your dentist for the flooding. The results of the First Step Act itself have been overwhelmingly positive. In August of 2023, the Council on Criminal Justice released a report showing that individuals released under the First Step Act had a recidivism rate 37% lower than those released prior to the FSA who were similarly situated. And even with the 10,000 prisoners released under the FSA beneficiaries accounted for a minuscule portion. We're talking about 0.02% of national arrests, 2/100ths of 1% of all national arrests.
Wow.
I meet
been
regularly with
successful.
First Step Act beneficiaries, like Matthew Charles here, including last month when I met with a group of entrepreneurs, homeowners, men and women, who are now able to live with their families in their communities and lead very productive lives. And some folks, like Weldon Angelos, were facing life sentences or effective life sentences for nonviolent drug offenses. Mr. Angelos, of course, was what first sparked my attention in criminal justice reform. When back in 2004, he was sentenced to 55 years in prison for selling 3 dime bags of marijuana to what turned out to be an undercover reporter, and someone working with the police.
That is an insane amount of
Wasn't
time
that?
for a little bit of weed, dude.
55 years.
Wow.
Undercover agent,
Dude.
a confidential informant. And because of the fact that he was charged for each of those dime bags sold over a 72-hour period, and because he had a gun on his person at the time of those transactions totaling no more than $350, a gun that was neither brandished nor discharged in connection with the offense, he was subject to the 924C stacking problem, where those were each treated as individual predicate offenses under the 3 strikes law, leaving the federal judge who sentenced him no choice but to give him 55 years.
And that's the downside to mandatory sentences. There are downsides to all this stuff. One of them being you send somebody to prison for 55 years for 3 little dime bags of weed, dude. Come on. That's ridiculous.
That is.
Judge Paul Cassell, himself a former federal prosecutor, hardly known as Minimum Cassell, not somebody known as being soft on crime, made the unusual step of issuing an opinion disagreeing with the sentence he was about to impose. He said there are rapists, there are murderers, hijackers, terrorists who don't get this much time in prison. Yet I, as a federal district judge, have no choice but to send you away to prison for 55 years. And then he said something that would haunt me ever since then. He said, only Congress can solve this problem. And so that's what got me involved in this effort, and what got me originally working with Senator Durbin after I got to the Senate, and grateful to him and so many others who worked hard on this effort. But the work is not done. One of many problems that we've got with the 924C stacking problem, we fixed it prospectively in the First Step Act, still needs to be fixed retrospectively. Mr. Angelos is out of prison only because President Obama commuted his sentence and President Trump later pardoned him. But there's a lot left to be done, and I look forward to doing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
He's not wrong. I mean, there are people that are serving time, like serious time, for stupid stuff. I mean, dude, come on. 3 dime bags of weed, really? For 55 years. Why? Because he had a gun on him. Hello? I'm not going to go sell drugs without being armed. Like, those guys get robbed all the time. Like, come on, man. All right, our next, oh, God, really? Our next clip is Senator Booker
Okay.
from New Jersey. This guy. Whoa. All right, here we go.
Senator Lee, I thank you personally for working so assiduously on this problem, having seen it firsthand. Thank you very much. Senator Booker?
Thanks so much. Just in this, first of all, thank you all, everybody in the panel for being here. It means a lot to me. Steve, can I start with you just because you have so much insight. I can't tell you how much benefit I get of visiting federal prisons, state prisons, jails, and actually turning to the people that work there every day. And it's amazing the wisdom that they have about just common sense solutions and ideas. One of the things that concerns me is the practical impact of the staffing shortages going on right now and what that means for incarcerated individuals, as well as, frankly, the safety and well-being of the people that work. What can you give us in terms of insights about what we should be doing about that problem?
Well, I appreciate that, Senator. Our number one concern, and it has been for years, is not filling the correctional officer positions that we've been appropriated through Congress. I throw some numbers out there, and right now we are 8,000 correctional officers short from what was appropriated from Congress. That's where it all starts. If we don't fill the correctional officer positions, then we don't have the first line security in our institutions to protect inmates and staff. But it also affects the programming for First Step Act because we're constantly pulling teachers, recreation specialists, case managers, counselors out of their primary jobs of actually, working to reduce recidivism and First Step Act programming, and we're actually utilizing them to fill a correctional officer spot. That's where it has to stop right there. If we can fix the staffing crisis we have, I think this program will just flourish in the future.
Yeah, and that's frustrating to me that we have this wisdom, we know what's working, but we're not filling spots. Number one, I think it's a safety issue for correctional officers as well as for inmates. But then the other thing is it's undermining the implementation of the First Step Act. Another thing I always do when I visit facilities is I turn to both people that work there as correctional officers and to wardens. I always ask them the question, are there people in this institution that are wasting taxpayer dollars and really shouldn't be here? And even the toughest wardens or correctional officers look at me and say, absolutely yes.
Yeah.
And one of those populations is just the elderly, that folks that have been there for years, sometimes decades. And there's legislation that is talking about ways to get those folks who really have aged, who are costing taxpayers even more money because there's a lot.
That's it right there, guys. Pay attention, because they would much rather spend their money on illegals than on old criminals that need health care. Yeah. Because if you go to prison, they're responsible for your health care.
Exactly why I did this clip, because I wanted to bring that up. And
yeah, look at you. Look at you. As much as I detest listening to this.
We think alike.
But yeah, absolutely. They don't want to pay for that. Like, it costs a lot of money to keep people with chronic health conditions locked up. That's what it's about. It's about the dollar. They don't care about these people.
Lots of costs associated with their age. Would you agree with that conclusion?
I believe it's unique to the individuals that we're talking about. I believe that there's a certain percent of the populations that fall within that category. There's a certain percent based on their sentencing that they've had before that wouldn't. But I think if the empirical data would support it, then it's something that should be looked at. I can't say that the elderly population, they don't cause any of the issues we have in federal prisons as far as discipline and other issues, but I would say it's probably lower than the rest of the prison population.
Yeah. Right, and there's some pilot programs that are showing a lot of promise in this case. I think some work that we should do together. Real quick, there are a lot of actually interesting pilot programs going on in our federal prisons and in some state prisons. And I know you know a lot of them, from agricultural farming work to work with animals and care. If you could see some of the pilot programs that you know about off the top of your head and say, gosh, if Congress would just expand this successful program, it would have such an impact on the working conditions of the people, of correctional officers, and the well-being and eventual success of incarcerated individuals. What are some things that come to mind when I ask that question?
I think vocational programs through education are the most important. It's important to have more vocational because as people progress through GED and they graduate, they can move on to those. But those individuals that already have high school diplomas and may already have GEDs, they can take those immediately upon being incarcerated. I think.
Yeah, he goes on to talk about more programs, but ultimately what it comes down to, and he said it, is we need to fill these positions. We need help because every, especially officer that you're down, creates a bigger safety hazard. All right, the last clip that we have for you guys tonight is Senator Hawley from Missouri.
And it's an interesting clip.
Okay, and it's 135 to 139.29, and that'll be the last clip.
More mental health.
And on the losing side of that.
I agree with Mr. Smith. There needs to be more mental health courts. And
can you put your microphone a little closer?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I went the wrong time. Sorry. I stopped at 125 instead of 135. Sorry, guys. Yes.
I was going to say that was Welch.
Yeah, there we go.
For being here. I'm going to be a bit of a dissenting voice today. I'll be honest with you. The passage of the First Step Act predates me in the Senate. This happened before I came, so I wasn't involved in any of the negotiations, and I didn't get to vote for it one way or another. But and I certainly thank you for all the hard work those of you who were involved with it did. But I have to tell you, I've got major concerns with how it is playing out, and particularly when it comes to fentanyl. You know, my state, like I think every other state, sadly, in the country, is in the midst of a major fentanyl epidemic.
Agreed.
I mean, just a major fentanyl epidemic. It is the #1 cause of death in the state of Missouri for young people who are over the age of 18, between 18 and 30, 32.
Good
by
Lord.
by some margin. And it's just getting worse. If you go and talk to any law enforcement official in the state of Missouri, and I had the privilege of working with them all over the state when I was the state's attorney general, they will tell you that our communities in Missouri, all of them, rural, urban, doesn't matter, are just awash in drugs, and fentanyl in particular, worse and worse and worse. So I've got serious concerns about how this law is playing out with respect to fentanyl in particular. And I just want to put a few things on the record. You know, number one is we've got 190 people a day in the United States who die of a fentanyl overdose. Another Senate committee just heard testimony on this last week. That is, as one witness said at that committee hearing, that's like a 737 crashing every single day.
Yeah.
And again, that is happening in my state. And what the First Step Act has done with regard to drug offenses, including fentanyl, is the following. It limited the application of enhanced penalties for serious drug offenses. It dramatically cut back on the use of mandatory minimums for serious drug offenses. Number three, it drastically scaled back punishments for repeat drug offenders. And the U.S. Sentencing Commission that tracks this data has found now that enhanced sentences for repeat offenders has gone down by more than 33% since the First Step Act was implemented. And all of that combines to effectively decrease big time the penalties for fentanyl. And then when you add in the fact that the current president's Sentencing Commission has gone even further, the Sentencing Commission now tracking again sentences for fentanyl found that the average fentanyl trafficking sentence, so not possession, trafficking, the average trafficking sentence has gone down by more than 12 months over the last 5 years, the average sentence. And more than a third of fentanyl offenders receive a downward variance from their recommended sentence. Again, that's trafficking, that's not possession.
And that is a problem. I agree, that is a problem.
So my concern is that at a time when we've got record amounts of fentanyl coming over the border, 27,000 pounds were seized last year. That's hundreds of millions of doses. The DE estimates that 20,000 pounds of fentanyl would be enough for 800 million lethal doses. That's 860% more seized last year than in 2019. And that's just the amount that was interdicted. Who knows how much actually got through.
Right, yeah.
At a time when we are just awash with this, the effect of the First Step Act when it comes to fentanyl has been to give traffickers and repeat offenders a pass. And I just think that is a huge problem. And I know in my state, it is having hugely detrimental effects. So, you know, I know Mr. Smith.
Okay. All right. Well, a little bit more.
Charles Smith, you're a prosecutor. In fact, right now you're the president of the National District Attorneys Association, I think. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator, that is correct.
Yeah, well, thank you for your tremendous work. And again, thank you all for being here. And thank you for your tremendous work in that connection. You're on the front lines, and believe me, I appreciate you. The people of Missouri appreciate our attorneys. We call them prosecuting attorneys in Missouri. And just appreciate the tremendous work that you do. And I salute your work, and to salute all of you on the panel. I just want to say from my part, as a former prosecutor, I'm concerned by the position we're putting prosecutors in. I'm concerned most of all, though, by the position we're putting kids and families in by allowing repeat trafficking serious offenders to get lighter, lesser sentences. And I'm concerned about the effects this is having on safety in my state, on overdoses in my state. And I hope that there's something that we can do about this in the future. Thank you.
All right. I mean, he made some valid points, right?
It's not perfect, but I think it's
it's not perfect. But so here's the thing, right? He's talking about, well, this is reducing sentences for fentanyl traffickers. Unless you're going to specifically name fentanyl in legislation, then yeah, it's going to have that effect. And okay, yeah, but by the way, fentanyl, horrific, it's killing people for sure. But we have to be very careful not to do what we did with the crack epidemic.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, there are so many people imprisoned now for decades because of the over-sentencing guidelines that were laid out. I think it's not perfect. The First Step Act is not perfect. But it is starting to rectify some of the problems that we've found ourselves in because of the overreaction to the crack epidemic. And, just my humble opinion. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for the clips. If you guys want to dip out, I appreciate you hanging out. Otherwise, I'm going to catch you up really quickly. So, we had a major storm here a few days ago. It was major. There were 80-mile-an-hour winds. Hurricane force winds is what they said. Baby hurricane, though. Let's be honest. That was a baby hurricane.
Was it 7,000 people lost?
There were like 7,000 people in the area that NIPSCO services that were without power. We were one of them. Our home lost power because, so right up the road at the corner, there's power lines and there's a tree, and the tree had snapped and come down on the power lines, right? So the whole neighborhood lost power. Pretty easy fix. I mean, I'm just saying. So what did they do? They got the police out. Police put flares up and some caution tape and blocked off the road right there, okay? It took NIPSCO almost just shy of 24 hours to get over here and hook the power back up. Unfortunately, this meant that we weren't able to do coffee break because we didn't have any power. Kind of hard for me to do, the video with no power. And it messed my schedule just completely up. However, I understand that we had I think the neighborhood consisted, at least on the little pin on the map when you go to the NIPSCO outage website, it tells you who all is out and what their progress is, right? You click on one and it'll say estimated restore time, whatever, right? They're going to go for the one with hundreds or 1,000 people that don't have power before they come to us, which was like 51, according to that. I get it. But I get it. So unfortunately, we were not able to do the videos on schedule like we planned. But apparently it's all fixed now. And I also used the opportunity to get something that should come in handy next time NIPSCO wants to take their sweet time. Jenny. Absolutely. Yep. Don't even think about it. It's locked. Anyway. No, look, man. Unfortunately, like the guy said, crimes have risen.
It has.
It has. I have lived in this home for the last 5 years, and I never, ever had any problems until a month or so ago. Somebody stole my son's bike. right out of my backyard, not my front yard, my backyard that has a gate. Unfortunately, maybe I should have put a lock on the gate. I have rectified that situation. I now have a lock, but he is sans like $400 something bicycle. Sucks. It sucks. Criminals suck. Especially thieves, dude. I can't stand. It just infuriates. Buy your own stuff. Get a job, dude. Anyway, so that's where we're at right now. We are going to, I also should be having some more shorts and other edited clips, edited for posterity, for whatever. We're not trying to censor anything, but we are trying to make it concise and boom. YouTube is really, really pushing the shorts. If you don't use shorts, your channel gets no views. No views. It doesn't appear in For You, like none of that. Look, I am not making any money off of this. I'm not doing this to make money. I am doing this to inform people and to have a good discussion with people. That's what I like. I got to play by their rules in order to get the word out. I would like to be, a sizable channel because I like the dialogue that goes with that. The more people you have in the comments that interact with you, the more entertaining it can be, I think. But anyway, we're working on that. We're trying to shovel out what YouTube wants. So check us out, YouTube, TikTok. We're going to start putting out shorts, a lot more of them, so that you can, get your daily dose of Dion in little short increments. So Sean doesn't know what his schedule is coming up, but as soon as he does, he will let me know, and I will let you know. In the meantime, we have, I believe, some interesting content coming up where we're going to tackle some of the more interesting and intriguing current events. But tomorrow night, I think we're going to put out
the Kamala
interview
with CNN.
Yeah, so Kamala Harris did an interview with CNN, of course, scripted and recorded. But her and Tim Waltz talked to CNN, and we got a couple of interesting clips from that you guys should really see. I know you don't want to listen to her. I didn't either. But these, 15 minutes or so tops is like, you need to hear this. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your time, and thank you for spending it with me and with Sean. We will talk to you again very, very soon. In the meantime, God bless you, God bless Indiana, and God bless the United States of America. Mwah! Have a great night.
If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose. This has been Dion's Daily Dose, hosted by Dion Bergeron. Executive producers, Sean Holgram and Michael Beebe. Copyright 2024. Dion's Daily Dose, all rights reserved.